You're listening to the ADHD Support Talk Radio podcast. ADHD Support Talk is brought to you by addclasses.com. Visit www.addclasses.com and sign up for free webinars and online events today. Well, hello and welcome back to ADHD Support Talk Radio. I'm your co-host, Lynne Edris, and I am a productivity coach helping overwhelmed professionals reduce procrastination, improve time management, and get more done with less effort so that they have more time, more energy, and even more money for what matters most to them. As you guys know, I'm a woman with ADD myself, so I've been where so many of you are, and I've come out the other side, so to speak. So I've gone from that constant state of chaos and underperformance to a life of more success and fulfillment than I once dreamed was possible. And I know each of you can share the same success yourselves. I truly believe that. You can learn more about me and what I do at www.coachingadvantages.com. And if you'd like to join my next live online productivity workshop, you can simply text the keyword productivity to the number 33777 to find out more about the next free event. Well, today I have with me Diane Délina, and we are going to talk about an interesting topic in a moment. We're going to talk about how Diane learned that she was on the autism spectrum in addition to having ADHD. So welcome, Diane. It's great to have you here.
Thank you very much, Lynn. I appreciate your invitation to be here.
My pleasure. Well, tell our listeners a little bit about you, introduce yourself, and tell us where they can learn more about you or connect with you.
All right. Well, I struggle a lot throughout my life, and like a lot of us, didn't know I had ADHD until I was about 38 years old. And when I learned about it, it was in a class where I was studying to become an elementary school teacher. And in special ed, the professor had a video about what we're going to encounter in the classroom. And as I watched this 1-hour video, I saw myself and my kids, and I was like, oh my goodness, we're good. All we have is ADHD. But then he was so horrible and negative about it that I wouldn't say anything. But I went home excited that I had an explanation for why I had been so different and never fit in anywhere, and why my kids were different. And I thought I was going to go home and find help. And it took 12 years for me to find help. 12 years of struggling and having a name, trying to get through the books and understand like what I could do. But it gave me more knowledge, but not really the management skills that I needed, right? To learn how to work with a different type of brain. So anyway, finally I found help because now we had Google, and I found so much. I was so excited, and it started me on a whole different journey. And I thought, finally there's some help, but I still couldn't, it was still complicated to find a coach or to do certain things because I live in the north of Ontario in Canada. A couple of years later, I decided to go back to school and become a social service worker and start counseling. And I wanted to work with people with ADHD. So I went to ADCA and got certified as an ADHD coach. And that just changed my whole life. I couldn't believe the difference when you know exactly how to manage your specific brain. It makes such a world of difference. We are not neurotypical, so living in a world where everything is geared for neurotypical brains to learn how to manage their neurotypical brain makes it very hard for us because we have a very different brain. So that started me on a whole journey of wanting to help people stop struggling. And I thought nobody should have to wait 12 years to find help. So here I am. And my mission is to make the world more ADHD friendly, one presentation at a time. So you can find me at ADHDlearningcenter.com and ADHD Learning Center on Facebook. I'm recently on Instagram under the name of Compassionate Coach Diane. I also am working on helping women who don't feel good enough through retreats at Yes, I'm Good Enough retreats. Just always looking to make people understand themselves so that they can build up their self-esteem and feel better about who they are. It's a big, important thing in life.
That's awesome. So you recently discovered that you have mild autism spectrum disorder. So mild autism or ASD. So tell us a little bit about your experience, how that came to light. Share a little bit of that with the listeners.
Well, you know what? I just learned this a couple of months ago. And I have to say that it stretched me at first, but I think it makes me a better coach, because I often had people who would call me right after they had the diagnosis of having ADHD, and they're mortified, right? They're scared. And
right.
I always say to them, it's okay. This helps us to find our clan. It helps us to know what we're dealing with. It also helps us get better services. So it's a good way to have a name for it so that we could better, manage what we're doing. So I didn't really understand their apprehension and their crisis after getting the diagnosis. So when I was sitting there and I'm looking at this doctor and she's talking to me and she starts to tell me that, wow, I was really checking this out and you're mildly autistic, or you have mild autism spectrum disorder. And she starts talking to me. I didn't hear anything she said after that. I kind of felt like I wanted to cry. I wanted to say, oh my goodness, what does this mean now? And I'm thinking, will people still want to work with me? What does this mean personally? I felt a bit of embarrassment. Where am I going to go from here? This changes everything about my life, right? And that came over me for a few minutes, and I thought, oh my goodness. And then I kind of tuned back into what she was saying. And she was saying, it doesn't change much about anything from who you were yesterday. And I'm thinking, but she said it will mean this and we could do that. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, that's so true. Now I get it why people, when they call me with this new diagnosis, are somewhat freaked out, because I think this is what I went through for the first, couple of minutes. Was inside of me, I was somewhat freaking out, thinking, what does this mean for the rest of my life?
Right.
So I had to take a few deep breaths and start to remember that, before I walked into this office, I was Diane Délina, a strong, courageous, overcomer, resilient, creative, funny, silly, happy person. And that this moment that I just learned that I had a spectrum disorder, which I don't think we're all in disorders, but they call them that. And I think it alarms us, right?
Right.
Oh no, I'm mentally disordered. So I'd like to change those words, but that's what I was faced with for those few minutes in that office. And I understand better now when people call me and they tell me that, they just found out they have ADHD and they're really scared.
Yeah.
So I'm a little more compassionate now about understanding that. So within a few minutes, though, inside myself, I started to deep breathe, which is always good for us, and to think that, yes, I'm the same person that I was a few minutes ago. It's just now I understand my brain better.
It's an important thing to remember. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. Whether I had even some other disorder, I'm still the same person that I was then. And then I thought, as I went home, I'm driving home, and I thought, oh, well, it gives me one more thing to talk about with people and one more way to relate, And it's really interesting because one of my kids and I, as I was learning about ADHD, and I see people with ADHD all the time, and some of them are mildly on the spectrum. And so I've had to do some digging and some research to help my clients. And I've talked to one of my kids about it. And we've often said, do you think, Mom, that maybe we have some of that, ASD? Because, we don't get humor very well. And, my son will say, I don't like being touched. And I know that I don't get humor, and I'm very literal. So these were all things that, we kind of suspected that it could be something that our family has a little bit more of, along with our ADHD. But to sit there and actually hear a doctor tell you that, yes, you do, is a whole other story.
Absolutely.
But the next day I wanted to read up on it. And I was really surprised at the things that I discovered. And you might be too.
Well, tell us a little bit about what you discovered.
Well, it's very different for males and females. And I had no clue. I don't know if you ever watched the show Parenthood, but it was all about this family that were really close knit, but one of them has a child that has autism spectrum disorder, and it's a boy. And he acts out a lot, and it's kind of like the whole show's the journey of him. And later in the series, they add on Ray Romano, who's an adult with ASD.
I didn't know that.
And so you see like how it develops from a child to an adult and some of the differences. And I had watched that and I found it really, really well done. And the boy actually is based on a true story, okay, from the boy who's the main actor. So as I was sitting there thinking about this and reading up on it, I was thinking, well, I think that's the only place that I've seen in this, in acting or in movies or anything, some portrayal of ASD. But then I remembered a few other ones, but they were all males. Never saw a woman or a female with ASD. I don't know. Have you seen any?
In like the media? Not that I can think of.
So that kind of got me thinking, like, not only is it not well known enough, it's mostly all well known on males. And then I did a little bit of reading, and most of the research has been done on boys. There's very little research done on girls. So a few things that I really want to get through to tell you is that a lot of the females are not the same as the males. Even when they do the testing, the brains light up almost normally in the females because females seek more connection and social, whereas the males, they prefer to be alone often, or they don't need deep connection. Like they can be in sports group or whatever they like and they're okay, but they never truly get like the best friend, or they're happy just being themselves, whereas the females look more for connections and social life. So how they get it mostly is by copying other people. And when I read that, I had to laugh because I thought, oh, all of my life I thought that was normal. I've always looked, ever since I was a little girl, I don't even remember like doing this consciously, I've always looked for somebody who was doing what I wanted to do and then tried to copy them. And then, you know, sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. So I'd find other people to copy and to try things from. And no, the one thing that is really bad about that is sometimes that person is not the best person to copy, and you can get yourself into trouble.
Right, absolutely.
And I think it's important for parents to hear this. The females often are very promiscuous because we're looking for love in all the wrong places. We're looking for that connection, and we're gullible and we believe people. So if somebody tells us that this is really good and they love us or they're going to stay, we'll often believe them.
Wow.
And so there's a much higher teen pregnancy rate, and I was one of them.
Wow.
Yeah. And then a lot of females with ASD get mistakenly diagnosed with eating disorders, but it's a lot of times it's because they don't like the texture of their food, so they're very, very skimpy or picky eaters. The smells, the taste, they're more sensitive to these things. The other thing was being diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, or being diagnosed with OCD, you know, obsessive compulsive behavior.
Right.
And all of these misdiagnoses refer back to the autism spectrum disorder in females. And so I actually started looking at some of my files from my past clients who had some of these issues, and some of them may actually be ASD. And so I have contacted them to say, you know, I didn't know about this before, but I'm learning about this, and I'm thinking because of these things, you might just want to get checked out.
Right.
You know, no harm in getting checked out. At least then you can tell, because it's not fun to be misdiagnosed or you're on medication for the wrong thing.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. And that's something that most of us with ADHD, or many of us with ADHD, have gone through, right? The information, well, for women, you know, most of the information that we learned about ADHD back in the day was geared toward boys and men. Most of the research was geared toward boys and men. The stereotypical combined ADHDer that's hyperactive and impulsive and inattentive isn't the way most of us show up as women. So it's interesting to learn there's a similar parallel in the autism spectrum disorders.
Yes.
And there's a lot of overlap in behaviors too, I think, between individuals with ADHD and individuals on the spectrum. And I think it's important for people to realize that it doesn't have to be either or. It can be,
exactly,
but it isn't always either or.
Exactly. Actually, I was told that I'm a lot less ADHD than I am autistic.
Interesting.
And I was like, what? And she said, well, that's what I'm seeing. And I said, well, why do I have all these things? She said, well, they cross over a lot.
Yeah.
Now, these are all things I had no clue, because we don't really get checked that thoroughly, but it was interesting. And I have a much better respect for my brain now. I think with all the things that has happened to it and things that are missing in it, it is still giving me this great, happy life. So I just want to put that out there that people with ADHD, or if you have ASD or anything else, look at all the great things you can still do. Look at the amazing miracles your brain is doing every day, functioning without all of its parts.
That's a great way to look at it, right?
Yeah,
the positive, look at the things that you do well, look at the things that are natural strengths and talents for you, because it isn't all negative, it isn't all downsides.
And a couple of other things I'd like to say about the girls, women, a lot of times they will seem to be somewhat naive or immature or really, really intense, and they may talk a lot or a little, but they're very, very intense when they get into stuff, and people think, oh, so sensitive or way too deep. And that's a clue too, because other people are typically not as intense or as sensitive. And that's true, but there is still a reason for it. And a lot of times it's because, and this is common with people with ADHD and with autism spectrum disorder, is that fairness is huge to us.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Fairness is huge. So if we feel that somebody is not being fair, I don't know about you, but even to this day, it's like loyalty is everything, right? If you're not fair to me, or I have a really hard time, I'll sit down and try to talk it out, but it's going to be hard for me now to go past that.
Yeah.
So, so I really see traits, and what I'm trying to learn now, because like I said, it's fairly new, is, am I more intense even than people with ADHD? Like, is that why, like, things get to me to the core of my being? But I'm also, an energetic, and I'm also empathic. So it's really hard sometimes to tell where the line is, right? Where the ADHD or the autism spectrum disorder line is. So my thought is, at this point, now that I've done a little reading and I see how it relates to me and so on, who cares?
Right.
Who cares? I am who I am.
You are, right.
I'm moving forward with my mission to make the world more ADHD friendly, and just adding and ASD friendly as well now. One presentation at a time, one retreat at a time.
One podcast at a time. That's awesome.
One podcast at a time, absolutely. And it's all about educating people that, even us, and it because you have ADD, and we can be anything that we want to be.
Absolutely.
The limits are in our head.
Absolutely.
Right? If we say that we can't do it, then we can't. And if we say we can do it, then we'll find a way to do it. It just may be different than other people.
Absolutely. Different does not mean wrong.
We think differently, but we can still get to where we want to go.
That's an important message. It really is. And for so many of us, after struggling for decades and, not really having a handle on the things that we're challenged by, it's easy to lose faith in that. But I say it all the time. I think every one of us is born with unique strengths and talents. And when we can tap into those strengths and really start to minimize our focus on the things that we struggle with, the sky really can be the limit.
Yes.
And that's not just fluff.
Right. No. And it's not, I don't know, if people actually follow a lot of the people out there who are making it, it's because they just believe they could.
Absolutely.
It's not because of anything else. And how many people with ADHD have just had no patience to wait for something, so they went and created something faster. And that's why we have, at the airport, we have the e-ticket.
Absolutely.
Because the guy couldn't wait for his plane for 5 hours. There's so many stories like that. So I always try to tell people to hang in there and see what you're really good at, and just do it. It doesn't matter if somebody's trying to label you, or if you have a diagnosis or not. Just be the best you can be and be happy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And be nice to yourself. That's good. It's good stuff. Do you have any sort of last thoughts you want to share with the listeners? Give out your contact information again, tell people how they can find you.
Sure. Well, I want to say to you, just remember that you're important, and you are more than good enough to go and get that life you really want. Don't settle for less. Okay. Too many people do that. And that's why I'm now expanding my business and doing Yes, I'm Good Enough retreats for women, helping women understand that they are good enough and learning to build their self-esteem. And I also love to do one-on-one coaching. I'm starting to do group coachings online. I do some in person in my town. And I definitely love to hear stories. I love it when people send me their stories. But you can find me on ADHDlearningcenter.com. By the same name, ADHD Learning Center on Facebook, or as Compassionate Coach Diane on Instagram. And I'm just trying my very best to help everybody understand a little bit better about ADHD. So if you want me to give a talk somewhere, let me know. We can do it by internet. I might even be able to show up there, because I really need for people to understand that ADHD is just a different brain. It's not a disorder. I really don't believe that. It's a different type of brain. It's existed for so long, and we just need different management skills, and we can accomplish amazing things, really whatever we want. There are so many actors and comedians and CEOs of companies and creators of so many great things on earth who have ADHD and even ASD. So don't feel bad about it,
Absolutely.
But use it as your power and really let it empower you.
Absolutely. I love it. I love it. That's a great message,
you.
Diane. Thank you so much for being here. And thank you again. Thank you all for listening. Again, I'm your co-host, Lynne Edris. And as always, I appreciate your attention. And I'll catch you next time.